God, I can't believe I'm doing this. It's time to look at Harry Potter for Kinect.
Silence! Everyone will please not panic.
Now, this being a Kinect game, it would be safe to lower your expectations by about 99.9%. I wasn't really sure what to expect from a Kinect Harry Potter game. In the end, Harry Potter for Kinect is a minigame compilation that relies on the same motion controls over and over again, and as you'd expect, those motion controls are crap, making this game an embarrassment to be associated with the other Harry Potter games in the franchise. The story mode, if you want to even call it that, is a bare-bones retelling of all 7 Harry Potter books. There are no cutscenes at all, just the still images with some narration. It's essentially the Spark Notes of the Spark Notes to the Spark Notes of the Harry Potter books. The narration here isn't even provided by Jim Dale or Stephen Fry, just some random guy doing his best impression. Somehow the LEGO games managed to convey more competent storytelling with grunts and groans. Granted, I shouldn't be looking for a decent story mode in a Kinect game, but come on, this just feels so half-assed it's not even funny. I mean, they could have at least used clips from the films to fill in the gaps. I mean, yeah, that's a bit cheap too, but I mean, it's better than the still images. I mean, the game only uses clips from the movies during the pre-level loading menus, and that feels like a huge waste. The story here is also picky on what events it wants to focus on. You'd think that you'd be playing through all of the highlights from each book and film in the series, but as you progress, you'll notice that focus on each film and book gets weaker and weaker as you move on. For example, the Sorcerer's Stone and Chamber of Secrets gameplay sections have their omissions to be sure, but a decent majority of what you'd expect is there. Like the potions class, the Quidditch match from year 1, the challenges protecting the Sorcerer's Stone, the Basilisk fight, the Mandrakes class. But then you get to year 3, which already is starting you near the end of the book by the Whomping Willow fight. And then year 4 is already missing the first task of the Triwizard Tournament. Year 5 has one section during the first meeting of the DA, and then you're already off to the Ministry to battle the Death Eaters. Year 6 you play Quidditch for a minute, and then battle Snape. And year 7 is by far the worst, as there's only one section representing Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows Part 1, which is the cafe battle. I mean, what happened to the Sky battle, the attack at the wedding, the Ministry infiltration? I mean, I guess the developers forgot about them, since the game just jumps over to the minecart from Hallows Part 2, and before you know it, the game's over. I mean, it really feels like a lot of effort and planning went into those first 2 years, and then it's like the developers just gave up as they went along. The gameplay is a mess thanks in part to those motion controls. I mean, they work for the most part, though. If you play the game on the advanced setting, you can forget about that totally. The casual mode has the actions moving rather slow, so you can easily work out the controls, and it's pretty forgiving if you mess up a little bit or you don't do something exact. The advanced mode, on the other hand, has things moving way too fast, and with these controls, you just can't keep up. The Kinect sensor just isn't at that level of technology where it can easily track fast motions, especially in this game. Most of the minigames revolve around you ducking, dodging, jumping, and waving your arm like an idiot. The dueling sections are probably the most decent part of the entire game, as it has you flicking spells with your hand, dodging by moving around, and using shield charms to protect yourself. Changing spells is alright, as you can either yell out the spell or make a weird hand gesture to change it. Yelling unfortunately rarely works, so more often than not you have to make the freaky pose to change spells, which usually means you're gonna have to take a few hits. The casual mode duels are easy in that you can just wave your hand like crazy and you'll probably win. The advanced mode you have to use shields more often because your enemies use them as well, though it's harder to switch between the shielding and dodging and casting, and that's again thanks in part to the controls trying to play catch up all the time. I would be lying though if I said this dueling stuff isn't somewhat fun, at least during the game's first few moments. I mean, slashing your hand around, yelling out spell names, moving around to block spells. I mean, every Harry Potter fan has probably fantasized about doing this at some point. However, the fun wears off quite early, because after a while you'll be waving your hand around like crazy, especially on the advanced setting, which means you're going to get tired out fast. I mean, that coupled with fighting with the controls on this advanced setting leads you to getting tired much more frequently, unless you're going to have a lot less fun. Some of the minigames, though, are really funny. Take the Quidditch match from Sorcerer's Stone, for example. You get to move around the stadium, which is really no big deal, but then the game tells you to punch the shit out of the other players when they get close, and it looks so overdone that I just couldn't stop laughing at it. The worst minigames, aside from the issues with the dueling stuff, are the ones where you have to chuck debris at the troll and Nagini. I found myself just swatting at the air with nothing happening. And coming at a very close second, almost topping it, would be the second task under the lake and the Room of Requirement scene, where you need to fire spells at the Grindylows and the Death Eater statues. And this control scheme is different from the regular duel, since here you actually have to use one hand to move the target reticle and your other hand to launch the spell, so it's even more confusing here. The biggest problem to the design is that each minigame is broken up into 3 sections, and if you screw up, you have to start all over again at the beginning. And this will actually happen quite a bit, since on the advanced settings it can take a few tries before you have any idea what the hell the motion controls are and how to use them in the correct situation. For example, I had to replay the Mandrake section way too many times because I couldn't get the damn controls to register when I needed the water jug or the slug repellent, and I ran out of time. In fact, That's a good way to describe this game in general. If the game gives you a simple motion control, just like flicking your hand around, it tends to work, but things like the Mandrake section require you to do a bunch of different move motions to get a bunch of different things to happen, and then it just crashes in on itself. I mean, the same thing happened with the troll battle where you need to register a gesture half a minute in advance, but by far the worst of this was during the winged key section, where you have to place your hands near the cluster of keys and swat at them. You might as well have a blindfold over your eyes, since no matter how close you think you are to the keys, you're probably not, and if you screw up, it's back to the beginning of the section again to try all over. And again, the controls seem simple enough in these situations. I mean, you're just waving your hands around or swatting away. I mean, hell, Sony's iToy back in the early 2000s had competent games that featured those types of motion controls, but the Kinect usually can't understand what it is you're doing half the time. Seriously, I almost wasted an hour on both the Mandrake section and the winged keys. The presentation overall is just embarrassing. These character models look sloppy, and in some sections the voice actors here are even worse than the ones from the movie-based games, and I didn't think that was possible. The voice acting will really get on your nerves though during the dueling sections, as your character, along with the enemy character, will scream out the name of every single spell, every single time they fire one.
Protego! Epicompus! Incent Protego! 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 No! Protego! Expelliarmus! Protego!
I mean, have these people ever heard of, like, non-verbal spells? I mean, could you imagine if the movies did this and every character yelled out every spell that they were casting? The biggest issue I took with the presentation, though, was the music. When you start the main game off, you do hear the John Williams theme for like a second, and then it's gone, and it does sort of creep up every once in a while, but only like about 5 seconds of it, and then it's never to be heard again. I just don't understand this shit. How the hell did the Lego games, both of them, manage to use all the music from all 8 of the films, but this game can't? And this game came out way after the fact of those 2 Lego games. I mean, I understand why the movie-based games weren't able to use music from the film, since their development is alongside the film, and therefore the score isn't finished at that time, but the music here just sounds like a cheap attempt of trying to rip off the more memorable music from the films. And more proof of the cheap presentation is this right here. You start off the Deathly Hallows Part 1 section, yet the trio are all wearing their Deathly Hallows Part 2 clothes. So it's like, if no one bothered to fix this simple issue, what makes you think they cared about anything else in this game, presentation-wise? Harry Potter Kinect is an interesting Kinect game that will probably appeal to the youngest of Potter fans, but anyone over the age of 10 will probably find this experiencing tiring and very disjointed. As Kinect games go, I guess this one isn't god-awful on the easy difficulty, since the controls do work rather well. However, crank that setting up to advanced and the controls just begin to fall apart. As usual, the Kinect starts having fits whenever you start moving around too much or the game gives you more than one option of a control scheme to use. The main thing about Harry Potter Kinect that really pisses me off is that this is the most recent Harry Potter game we've had released. I mean, this came out in 2012, and you'd think that since all the books were out, all the films had been released at that point, all the games for the films had been done, we'd finally get a Harry Potter game that would utilize all of those good elements from the past Harry Potter games and stick them all together. But nope, instead we end up getting this very lazy and half-assed cash grab that isn't worthy of being associated with this franchise. So now we have reached the official end of the second Harry Potter review series that I began very, very long time ago, and so we'll be soon starting the third part of that series when we get to look at the multiple handheld games that I skipped over, looking at the console versions in the early parts of the reviews. So that should be coming soon. Thanks again for watching, guys, and enjoy the rest of your day.